Hi, this is Eternal King here bringing you another LOR video today. So I wanted to provide a update on where Eddy is standing post-patch in LOR. We already have very definitive numbers. Elder Dragon is basically autopiloting exactly the same as he used to, 70% plus games. And the reason for that is basically exactly what I said it was, which might make this a kind of short video because again, basically what happened is a new director who was responsible for LOR because the old director left took a bunch of standard players together and said, how do we fix Elder Dragon? And then all of these players essentially looked at a lot of symptomatic causes for the Elder Dragon meta. If you don't know, there is basically what's called a symptom, and then there's what's called a root cause. So, for example, a standard player would look at something like Enraged Firespitter, and they would say, okay, Enraged Firespitter gets played on 6 in an Eddy deck with Deathless. That's really irritating. What a powerful card. Let's nerf it. And then they would look at something like Yeti in Freljord, right? And they would look at something like Yeti, and they would say, oh wow, Yeti comes down for less than 5 mana, and it's basically free. You know, what a powerful card. So, you know, Yeti comes down at something like, now it's a 9 mana card, it used to be a 7 mana card, but anyway, Yeti comes down, it would come down on like mana 4, and it would have Deathless, and it would be a 5/5, and they'd say, that's so powerful, what a powerful card, right? And then they would do the exact same thing in Shurima, and they would look at, now it's 7 mana, and they would look at this card, Horn Swarm Caller, and say, oh my god, Horn Swarm Caller comes down on 6, and it removes Deathless on all my cards in the Eddy meta, or in the Eddy mirror, sorry, and they say, oh wow, what a powerful card. All of those things are symptomatic, they're not root causes. The root cause card that makes Eddy play the way that Eddy does, which is basically an autopilot Unga Bunga archetype, is Cloud Drake. It is 100% Cloud Drake every single time. And again, this is confirmed now. Again, this is what literally put out a video talking about Cloud Drake pre-patch. And now that we're post-patch, we already have optimized Elder Dragon decks for the Eternal meta. And they are basically ramp-style decks that we saw in the last meta unchanged. The last Eternal season that I was, top 100 in, where I played, semi-seriously, basically this deck is unchanged from the way that it used to function. So it's basically Cloud Drake with the Mobilize play effect. It is Mobilize, the actual 3 mana Demacia card, because again, you're stacking ramp effects, so it's Mobilize, plus Cloud Drake, which is a Mobilize on a body, and then it is Spectral Matron on 8 to pull out basically Cytheria, Lady of Clouds, or again, accelerating even further, or pulling out a Heisho, which allows you to play another card for free. So basically the entire deck is Mobilize into Cloud Drake, into Spectral Matron, that pulls out a free Heisho, that pulls out a free Cytheria. So basically just by making that line of play, which is nothing but ramp and acceleration in a, creature-based strategy, which makes no sense. Like, ramp is supposed to be a spell effect. That's how Freljord works. Like, ramp is supposed to be spells. Basically, Elder Dragon with Cloud Drake as the linchpin card is able to creature ramp with massive bodies, which makes no sense in the context of the video game, which is why it autopilots the way that it does. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video and just say, like, okay, so now after the dust has settled, if you go to Runeterra AR and you look at the current meta stats for Eternal Ladder, they're just running things like Captain Erica, which is literally what I said in the last video, that, you just run Captain Erica instead of Enraged Firespitter because it's going to have Spell Shield and Deathless, which means, the captured unit or landmark is not going anywhere. It's staying under her fat butt. But again, like, it's just like obvious card design things like this, which is, it makes me wonder, why am I the only person in the community that called this? You have people like Sunny who are like, oh, new patch, so amazing. And then you have everyone else like, oh, new Eddy nerfs. And I was the only person in the community who said, Eddy is not nerfed, you guys are dumb. The only card that needs to change is Cloud Drake, and then by changing all of these auxiliary 6-drops, it literally does nothing. Because the only way to nerf Eddy in that fashion would be to basically nerf every 6-drop in the game, which you can't do. Like, fathomably speaking, like, you're not going to nerf Captain Erica and Enraged Firespitter and the Shurima card and every other 6-drop that exists in the game. Eddy's also back on the Ionia draw engine on 7, so it's back on sign-in, right? Which sign-in was nerfed previously. So like all of these nerfs are things that that the developers have tried to do to nerf Eddy under the new director, and they've all been wrong. Like nerfing sign-in, nerfing Enraged Fire Spitter, nerfing the Shurima Quicksand Dragon. Like again, just like I'm gonna nerf every single 6-drop that exists in the game until Eddy stops functioning. It's like you can't do it that way. You would literally have to nerf like 10 plus cards to nerf Eddy that way, and that's so dumb because you just end up nerfing a million other decks instead. Like it's literally so dumb to try to balance the game that way, and they keep doing it under the new director, and it's really problematic because again it kind of shows amateur hour over here. The only way to nerf Eddy successfully, and they should have done it for this Eternal season, which they didn't, is to have Cloud Drake say, I've reduced the cost of all dragons in hand by 1. It's the only change that needed to happen, and it's the only change that matters. Because then you can't accelerate things like Captain Erica, you can't accelerate things like Heisho, you can't accelerate things like Spectral Matron, you only get to accelerate things that say Dragon, like Eddy himself. It's supposed to be a Dragon tribal card, it's in Eddy, which is a Dragon deck, and there's a ton of 6-drops that are Dragons. So like why does the Dragon ramp card not read I only accelerate dragons? I don't understand why they didn't just make one card change that instead of like 3 card changes that did nothing. One card change that's effective and addresses the root cause and stops Eddy from autopiloting 70%, or 3 card changes that do nothing and in fact probably nerf other decks that liked those cards. It's so dumb, and it's the only kind of thing that like pro standard players could come up with because they are inherently short-sighted in the way they play the game. Like it's basically again the equivalent of asking a fighter jet pilot how to build an airplane. They're very good at piloting, they're not aeronautics engineers. It's a very big difference, and you have to make that distinction as a game developer that like, okay, I heard your complaints, I understand what you're saying, but you're wrong. It's actually this card that is accelerating these other cards that is the problem. But yeah, otherwise Eddy is basically unchanged. If you want to run Mobilize into Cloud Drake, into Spectral Matron, into Heisho, into Cytherea, basically all in a very short order, a very short number of turns, you're free to do that. Nothing is stopping you. That deck still just autopilots the exact same way. I don't think there was a single patch under the last game developer that literally accomplished nothing. That's an impressive feat to do as a game director, to essentially make a bunch of sidestep card changes and not do what you set out to accomplish. That's an impressive feat. Not saying that I should be game director, but like somebody in that staff left on Riot's team should have been like, I don't think changing these cards does anything, sir. And then he would have said, you're fired, I'm the new game director. But at least the guy would have been right. This is Eternal King, signing out.